Good morning, Americans. This is your favorite alien here on the morning of January 9th, 2024. And, well, today the Michigan Wolverines are national champions. For how long? Because, the NCAA is going to take it back, but, that's another story. I did that one already, and the NCAA taking back to Michigan, making Michigan vacate their title, and they'll do it, too. They don't like Michigan over at the NCAA. Neither does the Big Ten. Well, we'll see what comes up. But today's commentary. January 9th, 1964, 60 years ago. And as a resident alien from Panama, as CNN always puts it, and those congressmen and senators and judges put it, it's a black eye for the American people. Everything's a black eye for the American people, isn't it? Aren't you tired of that kind of thing? Where you say, everything is a black eye, it's a bad day for our country. Boy, you've had a lot of those in the last 5 years, haven't you? And they keep on using the same cliches, don't they? Yeah. Mm-hmm. But January 9th, 1964. Mind you, it was only a few months since November of 1963. Mr. L.B. Johnson, Lyndon Baines Johnson, was President of the United States. And 64 would be a year he would regret. Oh, poor Mr. Johnson. Oh, boy. Because to start the year, he had us. To end the year, he had the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which cost 58,000 lives. Whew. I don't blame him to be in that kind of hot seat, poor Mr. Johnson. Oh, and you also had an election which should have been John F. Kennedy, but he had to run instead on his own right. And, he got lucky that he had Barry Goldwater. Yeah. But January 9th, 1964. And it started as stupid as it could start. High school kids started this mess, people. That's what the American government don't tell you. It's high school kids that started this on both sides. In Panama, you had a school called the National Institute, okay? A very Arnulfo Arias Panamanista type of a high school where they indoctrinated the kids in Panamanista style Nazi propaganda. Okay? Because I told you before in my other videos, Arnulfo Arias was a president that the people loved, elected him, and he got deposed 3 times. Well, he lost that election in 64. But he was a serious candidate in January of that year. And the Americans in Balboa High School. And mind you, that's my alma mater. I graduated in 1977, December, as a class of 78. I graduated early from Balboa High School. Boy, that was a disaster. The kids in Balboa and the Institute have had a previous disagreement back in 1958, which the American government does not put to you guys. There was a riot in 1958 over the same stupid issue, flags. You must understand that between 58 and 64, there was very chilling relationships between the two countries of Panama and the USA. And it goes back to the Treaty of 1904, which was signed by a Frenchman, and no Panamanian ever signed that treaty. Can you imagine if you had a treaty with China and China signed for you guys? Or say a Russian signed a treaty for you guys against China, and well, they took over a portion of the United States. I don't think you guys would be pretty good too, would you? No. Well, they had numerous talks about this treaty. The last time they talked was 1936, and they made some minor adjustments to the treaty, but they boost Panama's income up to $2 million a year. $2 million a year, and the U.S. was making billions off this. But, hey, who am I to say, right? I'm just an alien from another planet and a resident alien of this country for Mr. DeGracia. Yeah, well. But anyway, in 1958, they had a disagreement that a few people went to the hospital with severe injuries. Nobody died, but Well, in 1964, so the rumor goes, I haven't substantiated yet, so it's a rumor, okay? Said that Arnulfo Arias had a Donald J. Trump-like January 6th rally at the high school. So they tell me. I can't substantiate it because I can't find any records of it. But then again, the Panamanian government and the U.S. government after 64, when they reestablished, and I'll get to this later, they have been pretty hush-hush about what happened here. So he went and had this rally, just like Donald J. Trump did on January 6, 2021. Yeah. And told the school people, go across the border and plant our flags at that disastrous high school over there. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know. Well, on January 8th, and this was supposed to be January 6th, 1964. Oh, January 6th? That name sounds familiar, doesn't it? Is that why Donald J. Trump picked that day, January 6th? Because it sounds familiar. Well, so the story goes that January 6th he did this assembly over at the Institute to assemble on the 9th and cross the border and plant the flag on the high school property in the pole. Take the flag of the United States down and fly up the Panamanian flag. Oh, boy. Now, you know that you don't take Old Glory down, do you? And you don't, as the president of Panama would say later, we don't take our flag, meaning Panamanian, kicking it over there, as he put it. And in Panama, kicking means a lot. It's a very derogatory term to say, patadas, which means kick it out there. Okay, so President Chari at the time, he was a very hot president because he had a thing that he could do nothing about, and it became an international incident and nothing flat. Well, they went to the high school. The Canal Zone police was there. Pepper spray and all kinds of tear gas and everything. Oh, boy, was it bad. The high school students from Balboa were not any better either. My father went to that high school in the 50s, and he was a bad boy in that high school. Oh, boy. So by the time I got there in the 70s, oh, man, the teachers that had him, they knew me, and they, oh, yeah, you're just like your father. Oh, no, ma'am. I'm a totally different guy than him. Well, as it turned out, the riots ensued a lot worse than the 1958 ones. And according to the records by the U.S. government, and this is sealed, okay, by both governments, but both governments made a point when they reestablished diplomatic relations that 22 people died. including a few Canal Zone policemen. And they were like the policemen of the Capitol was on January 6, 2021, defending the high school property. Ooh. Well, anyway, they forced these students back across the border. The United States government ordered, because you got 10 bases at the time in there, they ordered the U.S. Army from the bases there, and they had three bases that were Army bases, and you had tanks all across the border with guns drawn, and the fire on the button of the tank's main weapon, the what was it, 75 or 80 millimeter gun, which would make a big hole in whatever it hit. Oh yeah. And they blocked off the border, and the Americans couldn't go. They ordered all Americans back into the Canal Zone territory. My grandfather had to go. Yeah. And when we went with my grandfather, because he took us to the Canal Zone, he left one of my cousins in charge of the house. And surprisingly, the National Guard, which was the police force at the time in Panama, President Chari had ordered that any American expat who had property outside the U.S. Canal Zone, they guarded it, and they did. They guarded it pretty good for the 9 months that this ensued. I mean, 9 months, people. Because around January 12th, if I remember right, Panama severed relations with the United States, and therefore you had a country that was divided in half. And they had to cross the Canal Zone in order to get from one to the other. Well, after numerous negotiations, the bridge, which had just opened, the American Bridge of the Americas, which covers the Panama Canal and connects North and South America together, was built in 1962, opened in 1962. They were allowed to go through that bridge into that street, which was the 4th of July Avenue on the both sides of the country was named 4th of July Avenue. What a name for a street that later Panama renamed the Streets of the Martyrs. Well, yeah. Well, according to both countries, 22 people died. Unofficially, I can tell you it was more like 200-300 people died, because there was a lot of gunfire. The United States fired a few of their tanks. Oh boy, yeah. Oh yeah, there was a little bit of that. It was like 1989, first run for 1989. Okay, if you've seen the invasion of Panama in 1989. Oh boy, well. And what I'm saying, Americans, is the bad thinking on both sides, and kids on both sides, which is the problem that you have today. You got indoctrination of kids here in the United States, and especially the millennials, some of the Gen Xers, and I don't know about the G generations or the Z, but these new generations are extremist. Marjorie Taylor Greene, extremist over there. I think she's a Gen Xer. And the problem was that the government was like us baby boomers. We had everything and we didn't know what to do, so we messed it up. Panama was a backwater in 1964. Like I told you in my earlier video about Anulfo Arias, when he got elected 4 years later, he got deposed, and a military republic that lasted until 1989 was established. But Torrijos made the country back into an economic Latin American powerhouse. But it was a backwater in 64. I mean, very illiterate, very poor. You go outside the city of Panama and you had towns that were not very much populated, but they were nice. I mean, you could go in there, you had clean towns and everything. Panama City at the time was a disaster. You walked over there, and it was not a clean city at all. It was, I remember Panama in the 1960s. Whew, as a kid, oh boy, you walked down the streets and you had to hold your breath in. That's how bad it was. So, and it was kids that started this over flags. Ended up being an international incident that went to the United Nations. And the United Nations actually had a lot of different things on the Security Council on this one. It almost got really bad because the Soviet Union took advantage of it and they wanted to get into Panama at all costs. That never happened, but Brezhnev at the time said, hey, we got the reversal of Cuban Missile Crisis here. We can take advantage of this. Yeah, but it never did happen. But it was in the foreground of this mess. And put it this way, President Johnson had a hot seat on this thing. And 9 months with no diplomatic relations, and you're still holding the canal with the nations of Latin America and other nations of the world against you for what you're doing in Panama. Ooh. Over some kids' decision to take matters into their own hands. Do you understand me, Americans? It was like Donald J. Trump propagating this propaganda, and the kids in the high school had their own agenda. We hate Panamanians. And that was about what was going on in the late 50s, early 60s. It was a sobering thing to both sides. When I got to high school in the early 70s to junior high in Corundu, and that was only like 8 years later, 1972. Well, the things have changed. I thought I was going to get a rough time when I got to Corundu Junior High School because I went to elementary school in a small town called Kokoli, just inside the U.S. border. It was the first town inside the U.S. border there. Actually, about 4 or 5 miles inside the border, but yeah. So that's where all the Americans who lived in the Republic of Panama on the western side went to school for elementary. So we had a whole bus full of them, about 40, 50. Well, we had a lot of kids. Sometimes we had 2 buses. That's how bad it was with the Navy and which they had to have. They didn't have any place to stay in the canal zone, so they had to stay outside. But the Institute was still as bad as they were back in '64. They were still with their Anufo Arias Nazi-type propaganda over there. Torrijos, back in '72, he was in power for 4 years, and he hadn't got them in there. He did finally in 1978. He finally got them 12 years or 14 years after the fact. They buried the hatchet. Because I was one of the students from Balboa High School. There was me and another guy named Randy Minton that we went over there and we buried the hatchet with them. Because those guys, at the time, I don't think the Panamanian government wanted to have an institute like that anymore. It served their purpose in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, but it was getting bad apples, you know what I mean? But anyway, Americans, this is what I'm saying. Officially, 22 people died, a few American Canal Zone police and a few Americans. They don't say how many students died officially. I believe my rumors were, if I remember right, they say like 3 American students from Balboa High School lost their lives. I'm not confirming that because I can't find any records for it. And 22 students from Panama. So that's what they're saying, that the 22 students from Panama died. Actually, more than that died from the Institute. because that was a fierce battle between the Canal Zone police and the students throwing rocks and Molotov cocktails and everything at the American police. I mean, and then the Panamanian police started shooting back at them. Oh boy, that was it got pretty nasty. Is this what you want for your country, Americans? Really? I've had a taste of that, and a taste of insurrection, like I told you in my other videos. We've had two of them in 1968 and 69. One military and one by the people. And it doesn't taste too good, okay? Is this what you want for your country? Let me know. This is your favorite alien. Good day.